The day my father's will was read is the day I realized my family was dead. I had to stand there and watch my siblings, smug as could be, as some lawyer I'd never met read a document that turned my entire life into a lie. They left me with pennies and thought they'd buried me. They were wrong. They just handed me a shovel. In that moment, my grief curdled into cold, hard fury. My revenge story began. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been pushed aside, then hit that subscribe button, because you're in the right place. This isn't just a story about getting even over an inheritance. It's about clawing back what was stolen and dragging the truth into the light, no matter what it costs. My father, Richard, wasn't an easy man to know. To the world, he was Richard Albright, a titan of the construction industry, a self-made man who built an empire from nothing. To me, he was just Dad, a man who smelled of sawdust and old leather. His praise was rare, but when it came, it felt like standing in the sun. He wasn't exactly warm, but I always believed he was fair. Turns out, that belief was the first lie. My family was a triangle, and I was the odd one out. My older brother, Mark, was the heir apparent, ruthless, confident, with one of those smiles that never quite reaches the eyes. He was my father's shadow in the business. Then there was my sister, Sarah, a socialite who could weaponize her charm and lived for the power of the family name. They were a team, a two-headed snake that always moved in perfect, whispered sync. I was the quiet one, the bookish one. I'd left our small town for college and a career in archival history, a job they loved to mock as my dusty little hobby. Dad's death was sudden, a heart attack that ambushed us all. The grief was a physical thing, a thick, suffocating blanket. The days before the funeral were a blur of casseroles and empty condolences, all managed by Mark and Sarah with a chilling efficiency. They moved through it all like vultures performing grief for an audience. I just felt like a ghost in my own childhood home, my sorrow too messy for their polished production. The will reading was a week later. We all gathered in the sterile conference room of a lawyer I didn't recognize, a Mr. Davies. He had the slick, predatory look of a man who gets rich off of other people's misery. My father's longtime lawyer and friend, Mr. Henderson, was nowhere in sight. I'd later find out he'd retired abruptly about a year ago. The air in the room was so thick with tension you could taste it. Mark leaned back in his chair, radiating smug entitlement. Sarah was busy examining her manicure, pretending to be bored. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to go home and fall apart in peace. Mr. Davies cleared his throat and started reading. Most of it was legal jargon that just washed over me until he got to the point. The family business, Albright Construction, worth over $50 million, was to be split evenly between Mark and Sarah. The house, the stocks, the vacation properties, all of it went to them. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I waited. There had to be something else. A trust, a fund. My father, for all his faults, was a man of balance. He couldn't have. Then my name. To my youngest, Alex, Davies read, not even bothering to look up. I leave the sum of $1,000 and the contents of the pine box in the attic for any sentimental value they may hold. $1,000 and a pine box. The words just hung there, poisonous and heavy. I looked over at Mark and Sarah. The sad masks were gone. All I saw was a cold, triumphant glare. They knew. This wasn't a surprise, it was a victory lap. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. That can't be right. Mark let out a long, theatrical sigh. Alex, Dad made his wishes clear. He was disappointed in your choices. He didn't think you valued the family legacy. Sarah chimed in, her voice dripping with fake pity. We tried to talk to him, sweetie, but his mind was made up. He wanted the business in the hands of people who actually cared. Their lies were so rehearsed, so blatant, it was like a punch to the gut. Disappointed. My father had bankrolled my studies. He told me he was proud I was making my own way. We had our issues, sure, but this was a character assassination from beyond the grave, and my siblings were holding the pen. I looked at Mr. Davies. I want to see the signature page. I want to know when this was signed. He shifted in his seat. The will is perfectly valid, I assure you. Signed 6 months ago. 6 months ago, right after Dad's first mild heart scare. when he was vulnerable, isolated, and being cared for by the two people sitting right across from me. I stood up, my legs shaking. The grief that had been smothering me was gone, burned away by a white-hot rage. I could see it all so clearly, their whispers in his ear, their constant chipping away at his confidence, their careful, deliberate campaign to poison him against me. They hadn't just taken his company, they'd stolen his memory. They had twisted my father into a cruel stranger. I walked out of that office without saying another word. I left the $1,000 check on the table. As that heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, I felt one single thought cut through the noise in my head. My grief was gone. In its place was cold fury, and my revenge story had just begun. Those first few days were a blur of rage and disbelief. I just paced my small apartment, the $1,000 insult echoing in my head. It wasn't a bequest, it was a brand. Every good memory I had of my father was now tainted. Every past kindness felt like a potential lie. Mark and Sarah had already changed the locks on our family home. My calls went straight to voicemail. Just like that, I was an outcast, erased from the family story. They were counting on me to crumble, to just accept their version of the truth and disappear. That was their first mistake. Grief is a strange kind of fuel. For me, it didn't burn out into sadness. It hardened into steel. My quest started with that pine box from the attic. I had to send a certified letter just to arrange pickup. They left it on the front porch for me like a package. Inside, it was mostly what you'd expect. Old photo albums, my report cards, my mother's worn-out gardening gloves, a box of ghosts. But at the very bottom, tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of Moby Dick, was something that didn't belong. It was a small, old-fashioned brass key on a faded luggage tag. On the tag, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words. The truth is in the sound of her voice. Her voice, he didn't mean Sarah, he meant my mother. My mother, Eleanor, passed away 10 years ago. She was the heart of our family, the quiet diplomat who navigated my father's moods and my siblings' greed. To see this message from her, delivered by my father, felt like a lifeline thrown across time. The key was a mystery. It didn't fit anything in the house. It looked like it was for a safe deposit box. I spent the next week on a soul-crushing mission, calling every bank in a 50-mile radius. Finally, at a small, independent bank in the next town over, I got a hit. The First Patriot Bank. The key was for a box my father opened 30 years ago, with a note that only I could access it after his death. A kind bank manager named Mrs. Gable led me into the vault. She used her key and mine, and a long metal box slid out. My hands were trembling as I lifted the lid. It wasn't filled with stocks or jewels. It was filled with microcassette tapes. Dozens of them, each one neatly labeled with a date. And right on top was a small recorder and a folded letter in my mother's handwriting. "My dearest Alex," it began. "If you are reading this, then the worst has happened and the people I feared have shown their true colors. Your father is a good man, but he is blind to the ambition in his own house. I saw the rot in Mark and Sarah long ago. They have their father's drive, but none of his conscience. I started making these recordings to protect you, to protect the truth. Listen to them. Your father knew about this box. He promised to give you the key. If he kept that promise, it means a part of him still remembered who you were and who they are. Be smart. Be careful. Know you were always, always loved." I took the box home and started to listen, and it changed everything. I always thought my mother was a passive observer in our family dramas. I couldn't have been more wrong. She was a silent warrior. Her calm, steady voice coming through that tiny speaker became my guide. The tapes were a secret diary of my siblings' treachery. The first tape I played was from 8 years ago. My mother's voice was tight with worry. "Mark presented his quarterly report to Richard today," she said. "The numbers are too good." Richard was so proud, but I saw the invoices Mark left on the desk. He's using a new shell corporation as a supplier, MA Logistics. MA for Mark Albright. He's billing the family company at a 40% markup and pocketing the difference. Richard doesn't see it. He only sees what he wants to see. Another tape, 6 years old. Sarah has been spending a lot of time with Mr. Henderson's junior partner, a young lawyer named Davies. She jokes about it, calls him her little project. But I saw them at lunch. It wasn't a social call. She was showing him a folder. She's learning the family's legal and financial architecture, looking for weaknesses. She once told me, information is the only currency that matters. Now I see what she meant. A third tape from 4 years ago made my world tilt on its axis. Richard told me something tonight he's held in for 40 years. Before he met me, he had a son. His name is James. Richard has been supporting him quietly his whole life through an anonymous trust. He's a carpenter out in Oregon. Richard's greatest shame is that he never acknowledged him publicly. His original will, the one Henderson drafted, provides for James. I am terrified of what Mark and Sarah would do if they ever found out. It's the kind of secret that could destroy a man. I had a brother, and my siblings hadn't just disinherited me, they'd erased him too. The last dated tape from 18 months ago was filled with panic. Richard had a fall. He's fine, but Mark and Sarah have seized on it. They're insisting he's not fit to manage his affairs. They've brought in their own doctors. They convinced him to give Mark power of attorney. They are building a fortress around him, and I'm on the outside. The final recording was the hardest to hear. My mother was weeping. Henderson is gone. They forced him out. Davies is the new lawyer. They found out about James. I don't know how, but they did. They're using it against him. They're telling Richard that if he doesn't rewrite the will their way, they will expose James, ruin his life, and destroy Richard's public legacy. They are breaking him. I don't know what to do. The tape clicked off. That was it. My mother had handed me the entire blueprint of their plan. Forgery, extortion, fraud, elder abuse. It was all there in her voice. My first mission was to find my brother. My dusty hobby finally paid off. Using public records and property deeds, I tracked him down. A week later, I was standing on the porch of a beautifully crafted home in a small town in Oregon. The man who opened the door had my father's eyes. "My name is Alex Albright," I said, my voice shaky. I think we have the same father." James's story filled in the gaps. He knew who his father was but had been told Richard wanted no contact. He'd respected that, building his own life, never asking for more. The idea that our father had secretly wanted to provide for him, to acknowledge him, left him shaken. Our alliance was forged right there, out of a shared loss and a burning need for justice. The tapes were our map, but we needed ammunition. First, we found Mr. Henderson in a nearby nursing home. He was frail, but his mind was sharp. He was terrified of Mark and Sarah, but when I played him my mother's voice, he broke down. He wept. "She was a wonderful woman," he choked out. "They treated her terribly." He went to a locked drawer and produced his personal copy of our father's true last will and testament. In it, the estate was divided into 3 equal shares, for Mark, for me, and for our brother, James. Next, with some of James's savings, we hired a forensic accountant, a bulldog of a woman named Ms. Petrova. I gave her the one thing I had, the name of the shell corp my mother had uncovered. Within a week, she'd unraveled a web of fraud and illegal kickbacks totaling millions, all siphoned directly from Albright Construction into Mark's offshore accounts. We had it, the original will, proof of fraud, the tapes as evidence of extortion. We had all the pieces. It was time to burn their kingdom to the ground. I learned that revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's best served under the fluorescent lights of a legal conference room, with a stack of evidence so high it blocks out the sun. Through our new lawyer, a man who specialized in exactly this kind of fight, we requested a meeting. The official reason was to discuss outstanding sentimental assets. It was bait, and my siblings, arrogant and drunk on their victory, swam right for it. We chose the same conference room. The symmetry felt right. When I walked in with James and our lawyer, the look on Mark and Sarah's faces was a perfect mix of annoyance and pity. "Alex," Sarah said, dripping impatience, "I hope this won't take long. We're very busy people." "I'm sure you are," I replied, my voice perfectly calm. "Running a company built on lies must be exhausting." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Their smug masks tightened. "What is the meaning of this?" Mark demanded. "And who the hell is this?" he asked, gesturing at James. "This," I said, savoring the word, "is our brother." I will cherish the look on their faces for the rest of my life. It was a beautiful symphony of destruction, shock, denial, fear. And then, the dawning, soul-crushing realization that the secret they'd used to blackmail our father was sitting across the table from them. Sarah made a small, strangled sound. Mark's face turned a blotchy, furious red. Our lawyer, Mr. Vance, slid a document across the mahogany table. "This," he said, his voice a low rumble, "is your father's actual last will and testament. The one he signed with Mr. Henderson before you had him illegally forced out." Their lawyer, Davies, lunged for it, his slick composure shattering. His face went pale as he read. "This is inadmissible." "Is it?" I asked. I placed the small cassette recorder on the table. "My mother kept diaries." I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, clear and damning, detailing Mark's shell corporation. Billing the family company at a 40% markup and pocketing the difference. I hit stop. Mr. Vance slid a second file across the table. "And that is the forensic report confirming over $12 million in fraudulent transfers to offshore accounts in your name, Mark. That's wire fraud. It's a federal crime." Mark looked like he'd been punched in the throat. Sarah was just staring at me, her eyes burning with pure hatred. "But you didn't just steal money," I said, looking right at her. "You stole his life." I pressed play again, my mother's voice, now full of fear. "They found out about James. They are using it against him, telling him if he doesn't rewrite the will, they will expose James, ruin the boy's life." "That's called blackmail," James said, his voice quiet but heavy with the weight of a lifetime of being erased. "You used my existence to terrorize a sick old man." Mr. Vance laid the final piece on the table. "We also have a signed affidavit from Mr. Henderson detailing the threats and duress. And we have medical records showing a pattern of neglect and medication mismanagement in your father's final months. We'd be happy to turn it all over to the district attorney for an elder abuse investigation." Checkmate. The room was utterly silent. They were trapped. The smugness was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly panic of cornered animals. Mr. Vance laid out the terms. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. "Option A," he said. "You will immediately cede all control of Albright Construction. You will sign a legally binding confession that the will you submitted was fraudulent, instating the true will. The $12 million you stole will be returned to the company from your personal assets. You will walk away with absolutely nothing. In return for your full cooperation, the evidence of your crimes remains a private matter." He paused, letting it sink in. "Option B," he continued, "is we don't sign anything. And tomorrow morning, these files land on the desk of the U.S. Attorney and on the front page of every newspaper in this state. You'll lose the company anyway, you'll face multiple felony charges, and the Albright name you pretend to care about will be toxic for generations." He leaned back. "You have 5 minutes." What choice did they have? Broken and humiliated, they signed everything. I watched the ink dry on the papers that unraveled their entire world. Mark wouldn't look at me. Sarah was crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of pure rage at being caught. Their downfall was as swift as it was total. Repaying the $12 million bankrupted them. They lost the houses, the cars, the country club memberships. Their entire social network, built on money and status, evaporated overnight. They weren't just poor, they were pariahs. Mark, stripped of the company he thought was his birthright, became a hollowed-out man. Sarah tried to spin a story about a hostile takeover, but without money to back it up, her charm was useless. They were left with nothing but each other, two serpents trapped in the same cage, their poison finally turned inward. The months that followed were about rebuilding. James and I took over Albright Construction. It turned out he had our father's practical building sense, and I had the archival skills to sort through the financial chaos they'd left behind. We weren't just business partners, we were family. We were two strangers, bound by blood, building a future from the rubble of the past. We discovered our father's true legacy wasn't his money, but the grit he'd passed down to both of us. I never spoke to Mark or Sarah again. Their chapter in my life was closed. There was no joy in watching them fall. There was only a quiet, profound sense of justice. The kind of justice my mother had fought for in secret. I hadn't just reclaimed my inheritance, I had reclaimed the truth of who my parents were. They tried to write me out of the family story. In the end, I was the one who got to write the final chapter. My revenge wasn't some fiery explosion. It was a quiet, methodical demolition of a house built on lies. I got back my name, my father's true legacy, and a brother I never knew I had. My siblings were left with the one thing they created, an empty, silent life. So I have to ask you, what would you have done? Would you have walked away from the insult, or would you have dug for the truth, no matter where it led? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're still here, thank you for listening to my story.